There's a moment that reveals everything about your relationship with yourself, and most people completely miss it. It isn't a big, dramatic event. It's a quiet, internal shift that happens every single time someone questions your choices, your path, or your feelings. And your reaction in that split second, that quiet, internal response, determines whether you grow stronger or stay stuck. Together, we're going to uncover the one unconscious mistake that keeps so many of us trapped in cycles of self-doubt and reactive behavior. Think about it. When you feel misunderstood, what is your first instinct? For most of us, it's to defend, to explain, to build a case for our feelings, hoping that if we just present enough evidence, the other person will finally understand. But what if this very act of self-defense is the source of our exhaustion? What if the path to true self-respect isn't found in winning the argument, but in refusing to enter the courtroom in the first place? That is the journey we are on today. We will walk through 7 insights, 7 shifts in perspective, that will completely transform how you meet these moments of judgment, not with a shield, but with a compass. And be sure to stay with me on this journey, because the 5th insight is the one that truly acts as a game changer. For me, it was the key that separated me from years of emotional exhaustion. First, the moment of impact, the automatic urge to defend. Imagine someone questions an important decision you've made. Do you feel it? That immediate tightness in your chest, as if your very choices were being attacked. This automatic urge to defend yourself isn't a character flaw, but a primitive response from our nervous system. When we feel misunderstood, our mind enters survival mode and makes us believe we need to prove our worth. It's as if our self-worth depended on that perfect explanation that would convince the other person we're right. But this is where inner strength changes the entire equation. We begin to recognize that this urgency to justify ourselves is often a disguised form of people-pleasing. We come to understand that behind this impulse lies the fear of judgment and a desperate search for external validation. It's fascinating how our mind betrays us in these moments. It convinces us that explaining is an act of courage, when in reality it's surrendering our personal power. Those who have cultivated emotional regulation know there's a profound difference between communicating with clarity and defending desperately. The first comes from a place of inner peace. The second arises from fear. And this is where the defensive reaction reveals its true depth. It becomes an unconscious pattern that governs our lives. We often spend years explaining our choices to those who never asked for an explanation, justifying our dreams to those who simply cannot see the world through their eyes. And when we start observing this reaction, we discover a profound truth. We aren't defending ourselves from the person in front of us. We are defending ourselves from the ghosts of our past. It's as if each criticism awakened all the times you felt small or inadequate. But there's a different path, a way to respond that preserves your energy and keeps your dignity intact. Second, understanding the mind's betrayal, why we turn against ourselves. Have you ever noticed how your brain becomes your worst enemy the moment someone challenges you? There's something almost cruel about how our mind works in these situations. It floods us with every possible reason why we should defend ourselves, making it feel like our very survival depends on winning this argument. This isn't your fault. It's how we're wired. Your inner strength gets temporarily hijacked by ancient programming that mistakes a simple disagreement for a life-threatening attack. And what's fascinating, and a little tragic, is how our sense of self-worth gets tangled up in the need to be right. In that moment, our emotional core goes into overdrive, treating a simple criticism as if it were a life-or-death threat, a modern-day saber-toothed tiger. This reaction is so powerful because it taps into one of our deepest, most primal fears, the fear of being cast out, of not belonging. What's happening behind the scenes is even more revealing. The moment someone questions your choice, your brain starts frantically searching through your memory bank for evidence, building what feels like an airtight case for your defense. It's like having a lawyer in your head who never learned that not every battle needs to be fought. Your authentic response gets buried under layers of justification, and suddenly you're not speaking from your truth anymore. You're speaking from your wounds. The personal boundaries you've worked so hard to establish start feeling fragile, as if they need constant reinforcement through explanation. But here's the truly heartbreaking part of this cycle. The more desperately we defend ourselves, the more we disconnect from our own inner certainty. It's as if, in trying to prove our confidence to others, we lose it for ourselves. The cruelest part of this mental betrayal is how it makes you question yourself long after the conversation ends. You replay the interaction over and over, thinking of better arguments, more convincing explanations, smarter comebacks. Your mind becomes a battlefield where you're simultaneously the prosecutor, defense attorney, and defendant. This is where your inner strength faces its greatest test, not in the moment of criticism, but in the aftermath when you're alone with your thoughts. The voice that should be your greatest ally starts whispering doubts. Maybe they have a point. Maybe I should have explained it better. Maybe I really am making the wrong choice. But what if this entire internal courtroom drama, this exhausting trial you put yourself through, was built on a misunderstanding? What if it was never necessary to begin with? Third, the hidden cost of justification. When you launch into explanations and justifications, something fascinating happens beneath the surface, something most of us never recognize, because we're too caught up in the frantic effort of trying to be understood. Every word you speak in your own defense sends a hidden message. It teaches the other person that your decisions are negotiable, that your boundaries are merely suggestions, not facts. You're essentially handing them a roadmap to your insecurities, showing them exactly which buttons to push to pull you into a state of reaction. The tragedy is that the very act of over-explaining creates the dynamic you're trying to avoid. It makes your choices appear weak and questionable, even when they were perfectly sound to begin with. What started as an attempt to gain respect actually invites more scrutiny, more questions, and more judgment. But here's the deeper psychology at play. When you justify your choices extensively, you're not really talking to the other person anymore. You're trying to convince the doubting voice in your own head. Every elaborate explanation is actually a negotiation with your own uncertainty, a desperate attempt to feel confident about decisions you've already made. The other person becomes a mirror for your internal conflict, and their questioning triggers all the unresolved doubts you've been carrying. Does that feeling sound familiar? The one where a conversation leaves you feeling drained and confused, even when the other person wasn't particularly aggressive or unreasonable. You weren't just defending your choice to them, you were defending it to yourself, and that internal battle is exhausting. The moment you catch yourself building a case for your decisions is the moment you realize how disconnected you've become from your own inner authority. The most painful part of this cycle is how it gradually erodes your decision-making confidence over time. Each time you over-explain, you're essentially saying, "I'm not sure this was the right choice either," and your subconscious mind takes note of this uncertainty. Your inner wisdom starts to retreat because it learns that even when it guides you clearly, you'll second-guess it the moment someone else questions it. This creates a vicious cycle where you become less and less trusting of your own judgment, which makes you more defensive when others question you, which makes you trust yourself even less. Before you know it, you're not making decisions based on what feels right to you anymore. You're making them based on what you think you can most easily defend to others. But what happens when you finally realize that the one person whose approval you're so desperately seeking isn't someone whose opinion should have mattered in the first place? Before we continue, I just want to acknowledge you for being here. Taking this time for yourself is a profound act of self-respect. If this space feels like a place you belong, I invite you to become part of this journey with us by subscribing. We are a community of fellow travelers, exploring these paths together. Fourth, the divergence, the path of inner peace versus the path of reaction. There's a profound difference between people who have found their inner peace and those who remain trapped in reactive patterns. And it's not what most people think. It's not that peaceful people never feel criticized or questioned. They experience the same initial sting that everyone does. The difference lies in what happens in the seconds immediately after that moment of criticism hits. Reactive people immediately go into explanation mode, their minds racing to build a case for their choices, their hearts pounding as they feel their worth being questioned. But people with genuine inner peace do something completely different. They pause, they breathe, and they ask themselves a simple question. Is this person's opinion actually relevant to my life? This single moment of pause changes everything. While reactive people are already 3 sentences deep into their defense, peaceful people are quietly assessing whether this criticism even deserves their mental energy. This difference becomes even more apparent when you observe how each type responds to the same situation. When a reactive person is criticized, the stress becomes visible in their very body language. Tense shoulders, rapid speech, fidgeting hands. They speak faster than usual. Their voice might get slightly higher, and they pile on details as if more information will somehow make the criticism disappear. They're essentially handing over their emotional remote control to whoever happens to be questioning them at that moment. Peaceful people, on the other hand, maintain their centered presence. Their breathing stays steady, their voice remains calm, and they respond with simple, grounding statements like, "I hear your perspective," or "That hasn't been my experience." They're not being dismissive or rude. They're simply refusing to let someone else's opinion throw them off their internal balance. The most striking difference is in what happens after the interaction is over. Reactive people replay the conversation obsessively in their minds, thinking of all the things they should have said, feeling frustrated that they didn't defend themselves properly. They might lose sleep over it, bring it up to friends and family, and carry that defensive energy into their next interactions. But people with inner peace, they move on almost immediately. They don't ruminate because they weren't personally invested in changing someone else's mind about them. They understand that their worth isn't determined by consensus, and they don't need external validation to feel good about their choices. But here's what might surprise you. This difference isn't about personality types or natural temperament. It's actually about something much more. Fifth, the power of conscious silence to transform your presence. Conscious silence is so much more than simply staying quiet. It's a state of calm alertness where you tune into the deepest frequency of your own wisdom. When a truly peaceful person enters silence, they're not running away from the world or isolating themselves out of anger or frustration. Instead, they're creating a sacred internal space where they can process the emotional information they've collected during their interactions. It's as if they have a highly sophisticated internal laboratory where each experience is distilled into genuine understanding. During these moments of quietude, they're not ruminating about conversations or planning defensive responses. They're simply allowing the emotional dust to settle so they can clearly see what actually happened versus what their automatic reactions would like to believe happened. The transformation that occurs during this process is a form of quiet alchemy. Imagine someone who just stepped out of a tense meeting at work. Instead of immediately calling a friend to vent or mentally rehashing every word that was said, they find a quiet spot and simply breathe. In the first few minutes, they might feel the anxiety still pulsing in their chest, but gradually, as they remain present with these feelings without trying to change or analyze them, something profound shifts. The intense emotions begin to reveal the messages they were carrying. Perhaps they realize their irritation was actually a signal that their boundaries were disrespected, or that their anxiety was pointing to an area where they need to develop more confidence. The silence doesn't magically solve external problems, but it completely clarifies their internal relationship with them. When this person returns to the world after these moments of conscious silence, their very presence carries a new weight, a new stillness. It's not that they have all the answers or that they'll never feel uncomfortable again. It's that they've developed an unshakable confidence in their ability to navigate whatever emotional situation arises. They speak less, but their words carry more weight because they come from a place of genuine clarity. They don't need to prove anything to anyone because they've already proven to themselves that they can trust their own inner wisdom. People around them feel this shift immediately. There's something almost magnetic about the presence of someone who truly knows who they are and isn't afraid to occupy that space. But here's what fascinates me most about this transformation. Sixth, discovering the quiet courage of non-reaction. There's a profound strength that emerges when someone develops the ability to witness their own emotional reactions without immediately acting on them. This isn't about suppressing feelings or pretending they don't exist. It's about creating a sacred pause between stimulus and response, where true wisdom can emerge. When most people feel triggered, their nervous system seizes control of their inner world, flooding them with stress hormones that make thoughtful responses nearly impossible. But those who've cultivated this silent courage have trained themselves to recognize the early warning signs of emotional activation: the slight tension in their chest, the quickening of their breath, the familiar heat rising in their face. In this moment of recognition, instead of being swept away by the familiar current of reactivity, they anchor themselves in a deeper knowing that this feeling, however intense, is temporary information rather than an emergency requiring immediate action. The discipline required to maintain this inner stillness while chaos unfolds around you is a profound act of self-mastery. Picture someone sitting in a heated family dinner conversation where old wounds are being reopened and accusations are flying across the table, while everyone else is raising their voices and defending their positions. This person remains centered, breathing deeply, observing the emotional storm without adding to it. They're not detached or cold. If anything, they're more present than anyone else in the room because they're not consumed by their own defensive reactions. They can actually hear what's being said beneath the anger, notice the pain that's driving the aggression, and sense the underlying love that's been temporarily obscured by fear. This level of presence requires tremendous inner strength because every fiber of their conditioned self wants to jump into the fray, to defend, to prove, to fight back. But they've learned that true power lies in conscious choice rather than automatic reaction. What's fascinating is how this silent courage transforms not just the person practicing it, but the entire dynamic of any situation they enter. Their nervous system's regulation becomes contagious. People around them unconsciously begin to mirror their calm energy, finding themselves speaking more slowly, breathing more deeply, and thinking more clearly. It's as if they're carrying an invisible tuning fork that helps others remember their own capacity for peace. They become safe harbors in emotional storms, not because they have all the answers, but because they've proven to themselves that they can remain grounded no matter what external circumstances arise. This isn't a superpower reserved for monks or therapists. It's a skill that anyone can develop through practice, and once you experience the freedom that comes from not being enslaved by your immediate reactions. And finally, the ultimate freedom. The transformative power of embracing who you are when you stop fighting against your own sensitive nature and begin to embrace it. Something profound shifts. You realize this isn't about superficial self-acceptance. It's the moment of recognizing that what the world may have labeled a weakness is, in fact, a sophisticated form of intelligence. For years, you may have tried to build thicker skin, to be less affected by the world around you. But this is like trying to dim your own inner light just to make others more comfortable. The moment you realize your sensitivity is a high-definition emotional radar in a world where most are using basic equipment, everything changes. You see that your ability to feel deeply isn't a flaw to be cured, but a gift to be honored. This transformation is like watching a compass needle, after years of spinning erratically, finally find its true north. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. The apologies for being too much or too sensitive fade away, replaced by the quiet confidence of knowing this is how you are designed. The energy you once spent trying to be different is now redirected into cultivating your gifts. As a result, your relationships begin to transform. You start to attract those who value depth, who seek the very emotional intelligence you naturally possess, who want to see beyond the surface. What's beautiful about this acceptance is that it doesn't end with you. It creates a ripple effect. By embracing your own nature, you become a safe harbor for others. You give them unspoken permission to be emotionally honest, simply by being yourself. Your presence brings a new level of awareness to every room you enter. Friendships deepen, families connect on a truer level, because you are no longer afraid to see and speak to what lies beneath the surface. You understand that in a world that often feels disconnected, your sensitivity isn't just a personal asset. It's a lighthouse for others lost in the fog. And once you realize that your most vulnerable qualities are, in fact, your most powerful ones, a new question emerges. What is the first step in truly living from this newfound strength? So, what does this all come down to? It's about moving from reacting all the time to feeling truly comfortable and in control of yourself. It's that feeling deep down that you are enough and you don't have to constantly prove it to anyone. So, I want to leave you with a question to think about. What would change in your life if you just stopped explaining yourself to people who seem like they want to misunderstand you? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Which of these 7 points really hit home for you? Sharing your story helps build this community, and you never know who might need to read your words today. If this kind of reflection is helpful for you, feel free to subscribe and join us for more. And if you're curious about the incredible strength you can find by stepping back and being a little less available, and how, strangely enough, that can make people respect you even more, then you should watch the video on your screen next. It's the perfect next step on this journey.